fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Joe Goldberg is in the house, being a mystery.
I'm in the house. I'm a mystery. I'm a quadri. I'm a specter. I'm a ghost.
Oh.
I'm ready to head for my daughter's wedding in Palm Springs.
Oh, that's going to be so nice. The
weather's
weather's
driving
hot.
to see America. Yeah, it's 95 degrees in the shade. There's any shade.
Man, that's going to be good.
It's going to be good. It's good. Family together, Palm Springs, daughter's marriage, driving out there, see America, driving back, see some more America. 2,000 miles from Chicago.
Yeah. No, it'll be good. It'll be a nice change.
Yeah. And the daughter's getting married, that too.
Yeah, that's true. It's always good, right? So we've got a returning guest. Of course, he's you might have heard him. He's written a book or two. I don't know. Mr. Richard Chizmar is back with Memorials. So thank you for being here, Richard.
Hey, thanks for asking me again.
Yeah, it's always good. It's always good. Doing well lately.
Yeah, I've been doing well on the writing side, which is new. You know, I didn't write my first novel until I was in my early 50s, so a ton of short stories before that, essays, reviews, all that other good stuff. But most of my time was focused on the publishing. So, you know, it was a conscious decision to start focusing on writing novels finally. So yeah, the fact that they've been greeted with open arms by readers, and we've got a great publisher in Simon & Schuster Gallery Books, great editor Ed Schlesinger. So yeah, I feel very, very lucky.
When you start late, because even I started late, there's always a sort of a sense of maybe you're not as good as the other people that have been writing their whole life, you know, in the back of the mind. For myself, I felt that way, and I know I've talked to other authors in the same boat. That's why I sort of say you must be pretty happy. Or you feel pretty secure. You don't have that imposter syndrome, right?
The only time I really had that is when you're writing with Stephen King, you can't kind of help but feel that way at times.
Yeah.
But even that went away during the actual writing, you know, because you kind of just get lost in the story. And, what better place to get lost than, Castle Rock, Maine or Derry, Maine. And you kind of forget that who you're working with, and until the story's finished and you look at the byline again, and then you're like, oh, hell. But yeah, you know what? I've been writing since I was a little kid, like 8, 9 years old, and writing for publication. I sold my first short story when I think I was 21 or 20. The novels were a completely different beast for me. So yeah, I wouldn't quite say imposter syndrome. More as it's just, normal human nature of being scared to death that you're going to kind of, crap the bed and people are going to say, well, at least he writes a good short story. So, but yeah, even that went away after a book or two. You kind of, again, you just, you fall into the story and get taken away. And I've always, I've always had thick skin, whether it's from business, my background in athletics. I was, an athlete in college and high school. So you grow thick skin, and I know a lot of writers who say that and are full of it. And I've tried to convince various editors over the years. Now I actually do have thick skin. You can speak your mind. And they're always very, very careful. So they've run into the same thing I have, which is writers saying they have thick skin and then being super sensitive anyway. But yeah, so I can take the hits, but it's been a fun ride.
Hey, Richard, this is Joe. There's actually a couple of things here I want to do for my first question. You started as short stories and you went to novels, and the question always is, how did you make the transition from concise to a novel? I'm thinking about going the other way. I write novels. I want to write short stories. What's the difference for you in the difficulty or ease in writing one or the other?
You know what? That's the funny thing is, and I tell people this, I love to be able to talk to younger writers or to beginning writers and to just say, they always ask you for advice. And a lot of times doing these podcasts, they'll ask you, what advice do you have? And my big, groundbreaking piece of advice is just get to the end, write the end, because that simple, phrase right there, it really was the stumbling block that I had for decades, and that is in finishing a novel. I was trying to be too precise and trying to be too perfect. And if there's one thing I've learned, writing is not the field to try to be perfect, but particularly writing novels. They are, there's a reason that they're, these big sprawling things and that they take time, beyond just the simple word count. I spent decades trying to do that. And as a result, I never got to the point where I could write the end. I never, I always became intimidated because I was like, oh, well, I have no idea where this is going to go. And I'm at page 200, so I might as well quit and go write this novella or write this short story. But that's something I've learned, finish the book, because all kinds of neat things happen during the rewriting phase. And again, I used to be scared of like major rewrites because it made me nervous. I felt like, okay, you've got this house of cards, you start pulling stuff out way back on page 50, and then, they want to have a significant, revision take place on page 175. It's all going to fall apart. And what I've learned is, no, it's the opposite. If you really focus on those rewriting stages, some pretty amazing things can happen and things can connect that really you had no idea, while you were writing it, that they would connect. But, whether it's your subconscious, in my case, I always just say, I'd like to take credit for it, but I'm not smart enough to. So they just happen. There are these happy accidents where I go back in that third or fourth draft and I say, well, wow, if I write an extra half page here, it connects two plot points, that are 150 pages away from each other in the manuscript perfectly. And then, everyone's going to think, wow, look how smart he is. Look at how clever that is. But when really it was just this happy accident. So yeah, that's the big thing with novels is I've learned, just get to the end and then you can clean up any mess that you make.
I was just telling Joe that.
Yeah, you're in my angst. You're in my head there, Richard. This has been killing me. The last chapter's been killing me. And I'm getting in my own way. I'm sitting here going, let's end this interview so I can just turn this thing off and get back to this, finish this chapter. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, honestly, I think that's it. I tell people all the time, I don't think there's any secrets, but this is about as close as you can get, sitting in a pile in the corner of your desk, and then go to work, and you'll have a fresh set of eyes, and you'll be looking at it in a different way, and with renewed energy. And I think every time you find those little kind of, happy little Easter eggs of joy or connection, in the manuscript, I think it just re-energizes you even more. So at least that's how it's worked for me. I'm just, again, I'm grateful that they exist. And, I just feel like I'm brushing sand away and trying to find them, as opposed to creating them half the time.
Do you follow any set of rules? Do you have a kind of a pattern or any rules that you follow when you write a book?
No, I really don't. That's the thing. I mean, and again, there's a little bit, there more than a little bit. There's always that sense when I finish a book of, I have no idea how the hell I just did that. So there always is a little bit of, again, that intimidation creeps in a little bit when it's time to start a new one. Because, yeah, it's difficult to kind of concisely describe the process. Again, I wrote about it in an introduction. King and I just did a little separate joint introduction, to Form 1 for the Gwendy trilogy omnibus that's going to come out next year. All 3 books in under one cover. And in that introduction, I wrote about the fact that for me, collaboration is the ultimate kind of form of trust. And I feel like that applies to writing a book. You just, the difference is when you're writing a solo, the trust is in yourself. It's an ultimate act of faith, that guess what? The story's still going to make sense after you've put in, 3 more months and 200 more pages, because otherwise it's maddening. And again, I think about me all those years younger. I was kind of just chasing my own tail. So yeah, I don't really have a process. I don't really have a set schedule. When I hit my stride in a book, kind of unfortunately, the world goes away and I kind of, lose track of time and for days on end and don't eat as well as I should. And my wife and kids have to ask me the same question 3 or 4 times to get an answer. That's the big joke around here is, he's writing because he can barely pay attention to you. Having a regular schedule is something that I aspire to.
One day when you grow up.
Exactly.
So let's talk about memorials. What's the premise of this book?
It's pretty basic. It's 3 kids, and again, this is set back in 1983. I graduated from high school then, so I really wanted it, kind of similar to the first Boogeyman book, Chasing the Boogeyman, where it's set back in 88, because that's when I graduated from college. I went back to this time period. I really like the idea of, no modern technology, just the beginning of video cameras, no cell phones, all that business. So Memorials is about 3 college students in a rural Pennsylvania town who hit the road on a road trip for a project for their American Studies class. And what they're doing is these roadside memorials that pop up on the side of roads after there's an accident. They're doing a documentary, a study of grief and remembrance on these roadside memorials. And what they're doing is they're trying to track down the people who have been affected by these deaths and trying to get the stories behind each of these accidents and these memorials as again kind of a tribute to the families and the deceased. And what happens is, as they continue on their trip, they start noticing some disturbing similarities between a lot of these roadside memorials, and then before you know it, they're caught up in something they shouldn't be, and bad things are happening. And kind of that's that. It's, I describe it as it really is just like a campfire horror story, a throwback kind of road trip, 1980s, 1970s race with the devil type,
It's an interesting idea. So did it come to you driving along saying, hey, there's a roadside memorial, I want to write a story about it? Or were you saying, hey, I want to write a story about my high school years, what can I do? Where do your ideas come from?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've had the idea for like 20 years. A guy named John Sheck, who's an actor Hollywood and a producer and a writer, and we wrote a bunch of scripts together way back in the early 2000s. He reminded me, he's like, Rich, you finally, when we saw a notice for it really early on, like a year ago, he's like, hey, you finally did it. And I'm like, oh my God, you're right. We used to talk about this because I originally envisioned it as a film. It's obviously a very visual idea, 3 young, attractive college students piled into a van on the road, camping, campfires, the whole thing. And, I always envisioned it as a script, and I never sat down and wrote it. But I know, when it came time to do a standalone novel for Simon & Schuster as opposed to some in the Boogeyman series, it's the first idea that came in my head. As far as looking back and remembering, I don't remember a specific moment where the idea, kind of rushed to the surface. What I do remember is being fascinated by the idea that these roadside memorials kind of seemed to pop up everywhere, but overnight. I don't know where the dividing point was in Maryland, where I grew up, but I just know at some point I have no memory of them existing, never seeing them. When I was a kid walking around on foot, you're a kid, you walk, I grew up in a small town, we walked everywhere, or saw one on the side of the road, and never saw one, in someone's front yard. And then all of a sudden, at some point, I saw them everywhere. And that fascinated me. And, I did do a little bit of digging, over the years, kind of just saying, hey, where did these things start? And, what time period did they? And I found out that it had been a lot longer than I remembered, just not in my region. It depended. In the Southwest, Texas, New Mexico, that's kind of where they started, and they had been around for decades. But yeah, just that fascination of, hey, this wasn't here yesterday, now it is, and it's everywhere, and I want to know more about it. And it naturally, I think probably back then within minutes of thinking of it, the idea probably came to me, because I'm pretty warped and I tend to think of the dark side a lot. So yeah, I probably thought, these memorials are, they have the potential for some bad stuff.
In your characters, like how do you get into your characters' minds?
It's a little bit of everything, it's kind of like that stew, the hobo stew. You throw a little bit of everything in there. For me, it's whether I'm cannibalizing, the lives of people I know, whether it's people I've seen, while I'm waiting for my wife in front of a store, and I'm, 50 people walk by, and maybe a half a dozen of them kind of strike a chord in me, and I'm wondering.
There's a horror book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Something about this person or that person. Just I think just normal writing, writers' observations. You see something sometimes, and it sticks in your brain. So then that becomes part of a character. And then I think sometimes you're just writing people that you would either really like to know, or people that you would really like to know and strangle. So yeah, in this book we have, a 19-year-old who probably has a decent amount of myself in him, but also, some people I know and I'm friends with, and then, an 18-year-old African American who kind of reminds me again of a few people I knew in high school, and maybe someone I would really like to know. And then a woman who is a couple years older than them, a senior in college, and she's, kind of very much in control. And again, I grew up with 3 older sisters, so I'm sure some of that leaks into there. And I tend to write strong female characters. In the Boogeyman books, we have my good friend, and of course now, because I'm writing a new book with my son, my brain just blacks out and I can't even think of the name of the character. But Carly Albright in the Boogeyman book, people always say, I can't wait till there's a movie, and I say, I can't wait till there's a movie so I can see who they hire to play Carly, because to me, she's going to steal the movie. Very strong character, smart ass, very smart, but also vulnerable. And again, she's kind of a combination of all these strong female characters in my own life.
And the dialogue. And so how do you get into the dialogue? How do you do that? Do you practice dialogue? Do you...
Dialogue for me has always been, it's something that people have pointed out as a strong point, whether it's reviewers or readers. And I tend to, it's interesting because, again, you talk about cannibalizing people's lives. I've always been a listener, whether I'm, again, waiting in line somewhere for an event or to pick up some food and, I hear other conversations. It's so funny because my youngest son, Noah, is a long-time eavesdropper, and I can't even scold him for it. He'll be like, Dad, did you hear what they said? We're in line at the movies, and I'm just like, oh, my gosh. But yeah, I'm sure he was just born with that tendency because it's certainly in me. So I've always, again, had an open ear to the rest of the world. When I write, I really do try to write as people talk. And I've always, very, very, very little of writing comes easy to me. And I am like, I hear writers all the time say, wait till you read my new book. You're going to be floored. Or they post about it online and they say, I can't wait till you read my new book. It's the best one yet. And I always just scratch my head and I'm like, more power to you. Yeah. Because I could just never do that. Because no matter how happy I am with the person, I'm thinking, I'll put it out there. They might think it sucks. And guess what? Who am I to tell them it doesn't? But if there's one area where I always feel, like I could feel at least confident, is in writing dialogue. So I know I didn't really answer your question other than the, listening to the world around me thing. I don't know whether that's just, every writer has something that they feel super confident about, but for me, that's it. And I sound it out loud all the time. I mean, again, my family knows when I'm writing a book, or my friends, because I will be saying things out loud, and, my wife, Kara, will walk through the room, and she's like, who's Shirley? And I'm like, and she's like, oh, you're writing. Or I'll say something out loud that's fairly terrible, and they'll be like, oh, my God. But again, it's dialogue. I didn't say it. They said it.
Yeah. Yes, you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've put the book together. You have a book coming out. What makes a horror story, a horror book? What elements do you try to put in there that make it that? Is it a theme? Is it the people? Is it the setting? I know it's all of it, but what makes a horror story not an action adventure thriller story?
It's a really good question because, I feel like in some ways the Boogeyman books and some of the other stuff, certainly the Wendy books are they're written with Stephen King, but I don't really consider them horror. I always consider them more like, people say, well, describe it for me. And I'm like, it's kind of more of like a dark fairy tale, but there's some bad stuff. There's some horrific stuff. The Boogeyman books for me, kind of fall squarely in that thriller, suspense, label. But again, they're marketed as horror, and I'm fine with that. There are definitely some grisly stuff and suspenseful moments. But for me, like that overt horror term, for me, it's that sense of dread. That sense of deep-seated dread and again, I think Memorials is a horror book. There is certainly suspense, but it is more horrific in tone and in different scenes than any other novel-length, project I've worked on, and again, for me, whether it is a horror book or whether it's a dark suspense book or whatever the heck it is, the humanity of the characters is always at center for me. Once I can find kind of the beating heart of the people who I'm writing about, then I know I can do bad things to them, and the reader will care. I can do good things. I can make good things happen for them, and the reader will care. But until you get that point, it doesn't matter what you're writing because they're kind of just cardboard, stand-ups out there, and people are going to flip the pages and not be invested. But so it's that humanity that is at the core, I think, especially for horror novels.
When you mentioned the setting and the location of where you're at, is that a real important part of the book?
Yeah. And what's interesting, again, don't give me any credit because I'm not that smart, but it was kind of just, I wrote, the last two novels I wrote were set here in my hometown of Bel Air, Maryland, and Edgewood, Maryland. I didn't want to go too far away because, again, I grew up in this region in 1983, so I really kind of knew my stuff as far as the music and the culture and what the haircuts look like and, all that business. So I just kind of went next door to Pennsylvania, which is a state, that I know pretty darn well. I have a lot of relatives and friends there. And it just kind of found its home in Appalachia country. And, you talk about our setting that's ripe for dread and creepiness, as well as a lot of wonderful things, of course. But yeah, just, the Appalachia people have such a tradition in storytelling, and then just the physical landscape of the mountains and the valleys and the woods and the descriptions that you find, people stumbling upon these little clusters of homes that are these little towns that aren't on any map. They don't have a name because they're so far out of the way. And a lot of the Appalachian people still, kind of shun modern technology and that kind of thing. So again, you talk about an environment that's ripe to throw three typical, normal, everyday, spoiled college students in, and have them feel out of their element, and it's kind of perfect. So again, I didn't set out to write this novel set there. It's just happened to be where it settled, and I've been reaping the benefits of it for sure, as far as the early readers and reviews.
So what do you take away from doing a book? Like, what do you get out of each book that you do, and going through the whole process, where your family kind of has to ask you three questions, the same question three times, and you go through all this stuff, and you're talking out loud, all these voices, and watching people and stuff. But at the end of the process, and now, like for instance, this book, it'll be out, the 22nd, so when it's out and done, do you think that whole process changes you somehow?
I do. I do. I mean, I think it's a little bit like looking in a mirror for an extended period of time, no matter what the book is about. At least it is for me. It's the only way I know how to really write. It's again, one of those little writing secrets. I look back at a lot of the stories that I sold in my 20s, and, they were just about things that didn't matter to me, and that's okay. We're all about make-believe, at its heart, but, when I started to hit my stride, late 20s, early 30s, were when I began to write about things that really mattered to me, whether they were family or loss, guilt, regret, hope. A lot of my stories, a lot of my early reviews talked about how dark my stuff was, but how there was always that thread of hope running through it. And again, it was like looking in a mirror, because that really is my personality. People read my stuff and they're like, oh my God, in real life, you're kind of quiet. And those are only the people that know me real well. The people I've grown up with that know me, super well, they want me to shut up, but they can't get me to shut up. So yeah, it's just interesting. Again, that's a really good question, because I've thought of it. I think, because what I don't want to do, like when I wrote Chasing the Boogeyman, I kind of just disappeared from the world for 3 months. And I wrote that book very quickly, and it's been a huge success for me. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience writing about my family and my friends and my actual, real life, and then splicing in these fictional crimes and murders that occurred, and involving myself as a main character, blah, 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 blah. Kind of a once in a lifetime experience there that I again wrote a sequel to, so no longer once in a lifetime, but, that was really kind of a revealing process for me. On the plus side, all those things I just said. On the negative side, the fact that I pulled a Rip Van Winkle. I kind of just walked in my office one day, and then I didn't, walk out for 3 months later. And you start thinking about, wow, is it worth it? Because think about all the things you miss, and again, no one's asking me the same question. And for me, it's just, what? If the passion is there to tell that story, then yeah, it's worth it, because I'm going to grow from it. I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to pay some bills from it. But also there is that desire, like I said, to learn from it and learn how to do it in a healthier way, with a more of a regular schedule. And like I said, I don't really have a regular schedule now, but I have gotten it to the point where I no longer become so, swallowed up by the process that I'm gone for 3 months or 6, with a normal book.
I understand that totally.
Hey, Richard, when you wrote a book with yourself as the main character, sort of Anthony Horowitz style, is there something that you say, no, I've learned something about myself, but I'm not going to put that in the book. I don't want other people to know about that?
That was one of the neat things with Chasing the Boogeyman, is I kind of arrived at that crossroads several times where it's like, okay, do I really want to say this? The only way I could write that book and write it in that story, I should say, and write it in an honest way. First of all, the only way I found that I could tell it was by making myself a character. People say, hey, where did that decision come from? I say, well, when I started writing the introduction, I wasn't the main character. It was going to be a, third person narrative, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, by the time I got halfway through that introduction, I realized, no, this is me this time. And for real, me, my name, my home, my friends, my parents, that's the way this story needs to be told, in this true crime type of a format. And then as that process went on, again, you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, there were those moments where I had to kind of decide, how honest am I going to be here? And as I became obsessed as the character in this book with this killer and these killings that are happening in my hometown, I realized that, I'm not going to necessarily be shining a flashlight of positivity on myself the entire time. I'm going to have to kind of show myself crossing the line at times and kind of being forced to pull myself back, or letting Carly Albright, this character, pull me back. And again, it's not always the most, positive viewpoint. But I felt like I in order to tell the story, I had to be really honest in that way. And again, I don't know how I'm going to react because I haven't been involved in the serial murders and all that stuff. But I kind of had to, be as honest as I could be with how I thought I would. So again, I didn't turn into like a ghoul who's like, hoping for people to be killed. But again, I was kind of like, there were hints of like, the weatherman who's out there standing in a hurricane, and that there's part of them that wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world right then. Then soaked with their hair flying sideways and debris flying all around them, and thousands of people going to be displaced and damaged and deaths and all that stuff. So no, you don't want that to be happening. But since it's happening, yeah, I might as well be there. So yeah, good question, and something that I had to face many times. And then there's the opportunity to tell secrets too. Certain things that occurred in your life, moments that are special to you. Do you cross that line and put them down on paper and share them with everyone? And I found that in Chasing the Boogeyman, there were a couple instances where I did that. And I was really gratified after the fact because those were some moments that really people, resonated with people. And I felt, justified in kind of opening up the vault and sharing them.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do, right? Because you're vulnerable, especially these days with all the social media and stuff like that, right? People can be a little bit aggressive.
Oh, yeah.
I'm being nice there. But anyway, so listen, the book comes out on October 22nd. Everyone look forward to it. It's editor's pick, of course, already. And social media, where do you like people to go to find you?
I am on, under my own name, I am on Facebook, Instagram. I'm still on Twitter, which is no longer called Twitter, but I'm still there hanging around. And I have a TikTok thing, but I don't know what the heck I'm doing. So,
Yeah.
Some people follow me, and I'm just like, every once in a while I think about maybe I should put something up, but I don't even know how to do it like without music. So it's always funny. My youngest son will be like, "Hey, I saw your post. Why do you have that song with it?" And I'm like, I didn't put any song with it. It just happened. So I have to be careful. I'm always afraid I'm going to post something, really positive with this, some vile, song attached to it, and there you go.
Yeah, you gotta be careful there. But it's just another thing. So
exactly.
Well, and we appreciate it, and so thank you for coming on the show. The book is Memorials. Richard Chizmar.
Thanks. I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.